Hello and welcome to the Cuyamungue Institute, our Q&A Conversation for Exploration series. I'm Paul Robert, the Executive Director and President of the Institute, along with my wife, Laura Lee, the Director of Research, Education, and Outreach. We want to thank you for joining us today. The Cuyamungue Institute is an independent, nonprofit research organization committed to researching consciousness in the human experience, following the footsteps of our founder, anthropologist Dr. Felicitas Goodman. And as an educational institution, we recognize that to thrive, we're going to take an open approach. And we invite scholars in related fields to help broaden the scope of our own work and exploration. And that's why we call this Conversation for Exploration. And on these Sunday discussions, we've had a full spectrum of topics, from the arts to the sciences and everything in between. And you're welcome to visit our website at cuyamungeinstitute.com. All of our presentations are free, and as a nonprofit, we invite you to become a supporting member. And of course, we thank you, the community members, who continue to support the mission of the Cuyamungue Institute. Today, we continue our ongoing exploration into the effects of sound, music, and its influence on consciousness. At the core of this institute is the understanding that the human capacity for experiencing altered states is a normal biological function within us. We know we're hardwired to respond to sound and music. In fact, research shows us that music can reduce anxiety, blood pressure, and pain. Music can improve sleep quality, mood, mental alertness, and memory. Music is a total brain workout, and it can stimulate multiple parts of the brain. Also, recent studies suggest that it can help Parkinson's and stroke patients and dementia patients awaken memory when they listen to music from their youthful time. So, what are the qualities of music that have such an effect upon us? Music in sound works its magic deep in the brain, in the memory centers, the emotional centers, triggering healing. And we know it's been working its magic for a very long time. The earliest known flute from a bird bone over 40,000 years ago. In fact, we interviewed a gentleman named Bob Fink who did that research, and it's a podcast on our website.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, he's passed away, but we're glad we were able to gather the data and have that interview. But the sound of rattles and drums and clapping, sticks, chanting, singing goes back to the dawn of history. So how does these specific sounds do this? Well, we have some breakthroughs on this to share today. Much of this research done on this focuses on the rhythmic beats of percussion instruments. But as you're going to hear today, it goes much further. Let's look at sound in a broader sense, the impact of music, the use of sound as a key component of an induction ritual, actually altering states of consciousness. Laura?
Well, this fits in so beautifully with so much that we have done to explore this sound induction in this way. It fits with the patterns of nature that we've been looking at. It fits with how our thesis has been that we invent technology to imitate or replace what we already do, right. What nature has already equipped us with, then we build that same technology. And Lawson has helped me see that we've been doing that from a very, very, very early time in history. And you'll see that in his presentation. But these patterns of nature, it's fun to consider what sound is. And I like this definition. Sound is relayed through the stirring of molecules, of pressure waves flowing through the air or whatever medium and into our ears, and then processed in by our brain. And I think that's going to be the key to this, is how it's processed by the brain and what it nudges the brain to do. And I think this is the breakthrough aspect to Lawson's research. That this, I used to think that the particular sound of our key instrument for sound induction, if you would just test that rattle, I just want people to hear what I always thought we were imprinted by the regular use, by the first sound of rattle for altered states of consciousness was these types of rattles played by Dr. Goodman. That was our imprinting. I'll play that. I used to think that and only that kind of rattle worked for me. But what I realized through Lawson's research is that you can find a certain quality of sound, which he's going to delineate through a wide range of not only other indigenous instruments that I knew, but nature that I knew. And he's putting it together in this really key way. So I just want to say that, Lawson, thank you for being here and doing all the research that you're doing. And thank you for saying that this work that you've done with us helps you shape this. I appreciate that. And then you have really put things together. So many other research on why sound and monotone beat induces trance states is all about the beat. You have gone beyond that. You've gone into the very nuances of sound. You've gone into this, just this range of sound. He is going to show us sound analysis in a digital way. You're going to show us a range of auditory samples, widely sourced. You're going to look at neurological research as well as personal experience. And you've put together quite the presentation, so thank you.
As I was saying in the very beginning, before we actually started the recording today, I just really want to thank you for your ongoing investigation, the way that you're pushing the envelope, and you're helping us as an institute better understand the technology at the foundation of what we do. It's really been an exciting process to connect with you and watch your research impact us.
You're welcome, and thank you. And I'm really honored to be here and very grateful for all the help and everything, all the support you've given me. But like Laura was saying, this talk is going to focus on something a little bit different in terms of how sound can support altered states of consciousness, because a lot of the research in the past has focused on the rhythm and the beat and the
Tempo?
the sonic. The tempo and all that kind of stuff. And this presentation and this idea isn't meant to detract from those theories or hypotheses at all. But it's just supposed to really be kind of a supplement, a different way that music can support altered states of consciousness. And
You're
I
adding
want to
a real
do
key component to this that isn't often recognized. In fact, there's not even a word for it, is there?
Exactly, and we'll get into that.
It's hard to define.
Yeah, we'll get into that in the presentation. But basically, I want to give two quick notes before I get into the presentation. The first one, there's going to be a lot of audio examples and video examples, and we are focusing on a specific quality of sound. And so if you have like headphones sitting nearby you that you haven't plugged in, or something that you can do really quickly to get yourself with a really good quality speaker setup so that you can really hear and really listen to the nuance of the sounds that we're going to be playing, you'll have a better experience knowing what we're talking about. But for the most part, you should be able to hear everything, without $10,000 speakers. So you should be okay. But if you do have access, go ahead and grab those really quickly. And then also on the slideshow, there's quite a few slides and there's several steps that I have to go through about the research and the hypothesis and how it all fits together. And so I might go kind of quickly, but I do just want to make sure that I finish the slides with plenty of time afterwards for discussion and questions and all that stuff. So if I kind of go a little fast through something and you do have a question about it, I'll try and stop and maybe answer then. But I'm planning to finish with plenty of time to go back and cover all the details again afterwards. So that's kind of why I'm going to be going at a bit of a quicker pace.
And in your slides, you're going step by step by step to build your premise.
Exactly.
Using a lot of examples, and then you want us to listen to a key component of each sample that you give us. You're building your argument. So
exactly, yeah.
Our listeners know that. Yeah.
And a lot of the research into the rhythmic and the way that rhythm supports altered states of consciousness, one weakness with it that I find is that they don't really tell you step by step, okay, this is the quality of the rhythm that is meaningful. This is why it would be meaningful physically speaking, and then this is why it would be meaningful psychologically speaking, and such that rhythm actually supports an altered state of consciousness. It doesn't go from point A to point B and complete the whole thing. It's very theoretical at this point, in my opinion, from what I've read of it. And that's not to say that none of it's accurate or anything. I think they're really good ideas. But this timbre concept that I'm going to be talking about is just what I hear better, is what I've latched onto. And in this presentation, I'm going to take you from point A all the way to point B and explain what the quality of timbre is, where it appears in the world, how it impacts physically on the ear and the way that our ear processes sounds, and how that is meaningful and has a meaningful impact on our psychology, such that it would help support an altered state of consciousness. And then we'll kind of close out with, okay, these are the different altered states of consciousness where this kind of sound gets used, and the implications of this idea, of this hypothesis, if it has any weight. And I guess that's for y'all in the jury to decide today.
First of all, you have to define timbre.
We'll get into that. I've got a whole slide. I've got a whole
Okay.
slide
Perfect.
defining the timbre for you. So don't worry, everybody, if you haven't heard of that word yet. But really quickly, I'll just say timbre is how a sound sounds, and I'll have a more detailed explanation in a little bit. But here's the start of the slideshow. This is me. I picked the title because it's based on this Irish folk song called "The Wind That Shakes the Barley." I really like that song. I'm a little bit Irish. Very poetic title, so I just kind of stole it. But you'll see how this wind shaking the branches idea is actually very relevant to the topic that we're discussing. And now I'm going to start the slideshow with a really quick montage of a few different examples. And I'm going to close out later by showing you and telling you specifically what each example is and how it applies. But I just want to get you thinking first. Now that you know that we're going to be talking about how timbre, the way a sound sounds, can support an altered state of consciousness, I'm going to show you these examples, and I want you to think throughout the presentation, okay, how does this one connect to what he's talking about? Or maybe I can figure out, okay, that one's about this. That's how that, So think about these as we go through, and you will get the big payoff and the big explanation towards the end. So don't worry. So, as I launch into the presentation, I want to just really quickly cover a little bit of background of research that has been done into the way that sound and altered states of consciousness interact. So the research into sound and altered states of consciousness sort of started at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th centuries. And it started out with people noticing connections between certain instruments in traditions and religious or spiritual practices within those traditions. Like, say, drums get used a lot in a certain practice, and that's happening up in different places around the world. Somebody started making those connections and kind of investigating, okay, so a drum is related to this religious practice. And then it kind of evolved to percussion instruments more broadly. And then in 1951, obviously, Mircea Eliade's Shamanism came out, and that was just this epic tome covering all of these different shamanic traditions from a bunch of different places and throughout history. And it made a big case, though it was not actually about music, it made a big case for a lot of people that the frame drum, the one that is often used here at Cuyamungue, they have a couple of those. And in some Native American traditions, they also use a frame drum sort of thing in their spiritual practices. So that kind of came from, in a big part, at least the Western understanding that the frame drums associated with trance launched a little bit out of shamanism, the book, not the practice so much. Even though it wasn't actually a musical book, it was really focused on anthropology and didn't talk much about the sound of the drum or the music of it or things like that. But then a couple decades later, Gilbert Rouget wrote Music and Trance, and that was really the first big one that I'm aware of that focused on, okay, let's try and comprehensively discuss the relationship between music and this spiritual altered state of consciousness. And at the end of the book, Rouget said that there's no magic to it at all, is his words in the English translation. And he said that if there is a relationship between music and these altered states, it lies in psychological factors. And so the research after that kind of pivoted more in this direction, looking at EEGs with brain waves and MRIs, trying to see which parts of the brain are activated, and other research that's more psychological and less less neurological, I suppose, and thinking about, okay, how could this sound be connected in somebody's experience that launches them into this state, and that sort of thing. Then there's also sonic driving is kind of one subsection of the research that's been done previously. And sonic driving is defined by a guy that's got a website out there on the internet. He says that repetitive rhythmic stimuli are used to cause trance. Drumming is one of the most common practices. Modern dance music played loud can also have the same effect. And so what they're talking about really here is the rhythm and the power of the rhythm to push somebody into an altered state of consciousness. And ancient shamans used drumming to help them cross into other worlds on their errands of healing. Modern shamanic practices still use drums. Michael Harner's core shamanism practice requires the use of drums, either live or on tape. And anthropologist Felicitas Goodman also discovered that drumming was effective in allowing her various postures to work for spiritual purposes. And now this whole slide is from one section of this website. So that's why the reference to Dr. Goodman is kind of distanced, is because it's this Reverend Kirk Thomas it wrote that. But as you can see, there's a lot of different practices, modern and ancient, that have picked up on how drumming and rhythm does have an effect clearly in supporting altered states of consciousness. But as I mentioned earlier, the research that I've seen doesn't really take you step by step from the start, from the sound itself to why that sound has an impact, and then to what that impact is and how it supports those altered states of consciousness. And so that's something that I can kind of hope that I can fill in a little bit today. And here's a little bit deeper discussion of that sonic driving. Two of the main hypotheses within that umbrella are the Brainwave Hypothesis. This is just my name for it. And the idea is that the rhythms that are played match the frequency of the brainwave that you are trying to attain. So you play a rhythm on the drum that's relatively equivalent to the pace of the theta brainwaves, because we see a lot of theta brainwaves when people are in these altered states of consciousness. And that if you play these rhythms intensely enough and for enough of a prolonged period, then it will the brain waves will synchronize with the rhythms being played, and that's how you get into an altered state of consciousness. One of the problems with that, though, is that it doesn't take into account the frequency of the actual sound of the instruments being played, because there's waves there, and then there's also the waves of the rhythm of the drum being or other instrument being repeatedly activated. And this hypothesis kind of completely leaves out the frequencies of the actual sound waves and just focuses on the rhythm of the notes being played. Then there's what I call the magnetic field hypothesis. That's something that I believe Dr. Riccio was here last week, or maybe the week before. That's something that he talked about, I think, a couple of months ago in another presentation that he did. But there's this thing called the Schumann resonance, which is the rhythmic pulsing of Earth's magnetic field that has been demonstrated in some research to have an impact on cognition. And the idea here is that the rhythms played are in sync, or just the right way out of sync with this resonance of the Earth's magnetic field, that it pushes you into altered states of consciousness. But now timbre, as we've been saying it a few times, is the elephant in the room. And I thought that this picture was particularly appropriate because those are called the elephant's feet. And they're up in Tonalea, Arizona. And they're this really cool geological monument that I love. And that's why this is a picture not of a tree like all the other ones have been, but it's still nature. And there's still some grass and stuff. But the reason timbre is the elephant in the room is because it's something that's obviously there anytime we talk about sound or music. Timbre is literally just the way a sound sounds. According to the Oxford English Dictionary from 1971, it's the character or quality of a musical or vocal sound distinct from its pitch and intensity being volume, caused by the proportion in which the fundamental tone is combined with the harmonics or overtones. And I'll show you kind of a way to visualize that definition more in a little bit. But essentially, timbre is how a sound sounds. And the reason it's the elephant in the room is because we don't have a good way of talking about it. There aren't really words for it. As Cornelia Fell said, as scholars, indeed as listeners, we have a difficult time to describing timbre. Though we can talk about it in large generalities as though it were a conceptual abstraction, it's only by deliberate effort that we conceptualize it as a distinctly ongoing dynamic feature of music with the same clarity as pitch or meter. And tempo is the reason it's kind of easy to latch onto, is because it's measured in beats per minute. How many times the metronome clicks every second or every minute, or we've got something easy to kind of to measure it along with, and then we just have a number. Oh, it's 120 beats per minute, or it's 200. And then meter is categorized also by these easy numbers, like we're playing in 4/4, we're doing just 5/8, these different musical meters that we have, really easy to talk about because we can just smack that label on there, and then we say, okay, this is what it is. We have things to describe it that are very simple and easy to use. And then pitch, same thing. It's measured in hertz, and it's been theorized into scales and modes and chords. So timbre is just as important as pitch or meter and tempo. But for pitch, meter, and tempo, we have these easy ways to describe it. We have these systems of coming up with these fractions, or saying it as a beats per minute. Or with pitch, we have the notes or the scales or the modes and the frequency. But for timbre, there aren't words for it at all. And I'll get into a little bit about that right here. So, as I said, there are no words for timbre. In a research done by a group of folks called Feld and Fox and Porcello and Samuels, they were working in 2004, they observed the way that people working in recording studios in the US talked about the way that sounds sounded. And they came up with these categories of ways that people describe timbre without actually using specific words to describe timbre. And all of them are sort of metaphorical in a way. The first category they came up with is spoken or sung vocables, like what we see here is, I believe, zzz, or sh, and then there is lexical onomatopoeic metaphors. That's what they call them. And it's literally saying click or buzz or hiss, where the words kind of sound like the sound, but technically speaking, the words don't actually mean the sound. And then there was pure metaphor, a wet sound, or a dry sound, or a deep, or a bright sound, or a round sound. And then association was the last one that they had, where somebody in the studio would say, oh, I want it to sound like the Beatles, or I want it to sound like Led Zeppelin. So in order to talk about the sound, we've got all of these different ways that we do it, but the problem is nobody really knows exactly what the other person means when they say, oh, I want it to be more buzzy. Somebody could say that and you think, oh, I think I know what he means. And then you do it and it's actually slightly or completely different from what you thought they meant by that, because it's not a specific word with a specific and clear meaning. So for a clearer picture of timbre, at this time, it's best to just visualize it. And so what I've got here is a video of somebody, who's put together a bunch of different spectrograms, which is just a visualization of the frequencies that make up a sound. And they've got the spectrogram of several different instruments being played. I think these are all electronic imitations of the instruments, but they're pretty accurate. So first you'll hear a piano, and then you'll hear a harpsichord, and then I think a guitar, and then maybe a violin and a bassoon and some other instruments in there. And you'll see that even though they're all playing the same note, they have dramatically different timbres, and it shows in this visualization. So really quickly, I'm going to jump ahead to this slide where I talk about the spectrograms, because we just saw one, and I'm going to be showing several throughout this presentation. And so what we're seeing here is 6 different spectrograms of 3 different audio examples. And just a little extra description, frequency is measured in hertz or cycles per second, so the number of times that a wave either hits a bottom or a peak within a second. And it presents in the world logarithmically because of the fact that it's measured, per second. So as you get higher up in the number of hertz that a sound wave is, the difference between 1 hertz and, like, for example, 440 hertz and 441 is a lot smaller than the difference between 1 hertz and 2. And as you keep going up, that difference keeps getting smaller and smaller. And so often you'll see a spectrogram presented with a logarithmic scale on the hertz axis, which I have here as my x-axis, the horizontal one. And the reason for that is because the human hearing range is mostly in the bit of the lower side. It's about 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. And when you present the spectrogram with this logarithmic scale, basically what it does is zoom in on that lower area. But what I've done in this presentation is, as much as possible, I've presented it both with the logarithmic scale and the straight scale. And what that does is that it zooms in on the higher frequencies in the second one, where it's presented where, the difference between 1 hertz to the next is constant in terms of the display on the graph. So I've got them both side by side, and what you see here is, I shouldn't have clicked that. What you see here and here are the same sound example, but this one is with that logarithmic scale, and you can kind of tell by it, it's got these exponents up here, and this one is on the straight scale, and these red lines are at 1,000 and 10,000 hertz to demonstrate the difference between the two scales. So everything that's between these two lines here is the same that's what's between these two lines here, and everything that's above this one is all this here on this other scale. So you can see, like I was saying, this one really zooms in on the higher frequencies, this one really zooms in on the lower frequencies. And in order to truly understand what's in the sound and all the frequencies that make it up, I think it's best to show both. Now, the other thing that's on these charts is the time, and I put the time on the vertical, the y-axis. So these are 4-second samples of a sound. And so what you're seeing, I'm going to use this one as the example. What you're seeing here is every one of these kind of columns, or these rows, since they're laying out, is a note, is the activation of a note. And the little bit of space that you see between them here is the dead air, where there was no sound going on. And so within this kind of row, everything that's not blue is the frequencies that are present within the sound of that note being played on that instrument. This one's a little bit more chaotic because it's moving to a bunch of different notes, but this one is just playing the same note over and over again, so you can really see it clearly. And this little scale shows you that the closer it gets to an intense yellow, the more that frequency is present within a sound, the more intense it is. So these little bands of yellow here that's what you're really hearing a whole lot of. In this one, there's more green in the middle, there's more kind of a wash, there's a whole lot of different stuff in varying frequencies going on, and we'll talk more about that later. But as we were saying, there are no words for timbre, so I decided to kind of come up with one to describe the type of sound that we're going to be focusing in on today, and that word is latuseciant. It comes from Latin. It means that the sound contains a wide range of harmonically ambiguous frequencies. Basically, that the harmonically ambiguous part means that, back when Pythagoras and the Greeks were dividing strings in half and saying, okay, now that's the octave, and they're discovering these beautiful mathematical proportions that you could come up with sound and instruments. When it's harmonically ambiguous, those mathematical proportions aren't there. Those aren't present. It's basically just random or scattered, as the Latin word that I pulled in to come up with this word describes. And a sound is latticenciant, like I said, if it's got a really broad range of frequencies and the frequencies within it don't make up those mathematical relationships. And all sounds have a certain amount of this. No sound that's not digitally created is perfectly harmonic, where every single frequency within it mathematically fits into the other ones below it. So they've all got a little bit of this, but some of them have a whole lot more. And my hypothesis that I'm going to go through today is that highly latticenciant sounds and soundscapes are more effective at supporting altered states of consciousness because they interfere with our physiological aural processing mechanisms that are designed to simplify the sound world that we live in and maximize our energy efficiency. And so here I'm going to show you really quickly 2 sound examples. One of them is highly latticenciant and the other one is not so much. Now I'm going to show you the not so much one first, and it is coming from an mbira, which is an instrument from Zimbabwe that I have that I'm going to take 2 seconds to grab. It's literally just around the corner. So it looks like this, and as you can see down here, it's got these buzzers on it, and they're a critical part of the instrument. But to demonstrate the 2 different types of sound, the first time I recorded myself playing it with a t-shirt over these so that they would not be activated. And that's not the way that it would ever be played in any sort of traditional context, but I'm just doing that to emphasize the difference in the sound. And then here's that same note on the same instrument with the buzzers. As you can hopefully tell, there's a dramatic difference in the way that they sound, and that difference is visualized here on the spectrogram by all of this green. Here you see on this one there's a lot of blue, there's a lot of space in between, and you can even see some columns of emphasized frequencies that show up each time I play the note. On this one it's just a wash. You can't really pick out those emphasized frequencies nearly as much, and this whole range of frequencies is activated when you add those buzzers in. So again, that one would be highly latticenciant. And now I'm going to show you a few examples of how this type of sound quality appears in different traditions around the world. I'm calling it the natural habitat. But I've got a few different traditions, and the first one I wanted to show you was our very own Cuyamungue Institute. The rattles that they use, the rattle that Paul showed you earlier, is incredibly latticenciant in the way that it sounds. And here are the paired spectrograms. It's reverse of what I showed you earlier. This one is the straight one, and this one's the logarithmic one here in both cases. But these are 2 rattles that Paul sent me recordings of when I conducted my survey last summer. And this is what they look like when you analyze them and see what makes up that sound. And now I'm also going to point out that you see this huge drop off right here, and it's here on this recording. I believe that's because of the microphone that was used. Most microphones have a big drop off right about that 16,000 hertz range, just because, as I mentioned earlier, human hearing is mostly below that, so they're built to tamp down a little bit the higher frequencies because they're not necessary for the recording. I think that's what's causing this. That's not part of the nature of the instrument, that it's just got that sudden drop off of frequencies. And here's what those sound like. You've kind of probably heard them before. There's another one. And
I'm
then
so glad to know that swish, that sound. I didn't know that was a recording studio's technical terminology. That is so cool to know.
Yeah,
I just wanted to
definitely.
interject that. That's
Oh,
the
yeah.
quality that we always look for. The that. I
Yeah,
never knew
exactly.
how that, oh, this is fascinating.
And then to compare these graphs to, I've got a recording of a flute, kind of the similar style that Paul plays at the end of the rituals, and it's just playing one note over and over again in this recording. And you can see that within each note, there's these clearly emphasized frequencies within it, and those are the harmonics and the overtones that fold neatly within to the main note that's being played. Whatever note you hear there, just the way that the physics of musical instruments works is that they produce other frequencies that are highly emphasized, and that when you do the math, they fold into each other in halves or thirds in these beautiful proportions. And you can see that right here, these columns of emphasized frequencies that stick out. But with the rattles, that's not there at all. It's just like before when you added the buzzer to the mbira, it's this wash of harmonically ambiguous frequencies all up and down the range of hearing. And now here's another place that Latisekiance appears. ASMR, autonomous sensory meridian response, is a phenomenon that's gained a lot of awareness and popularity since around 2010. It's something I've experienced since I was as early as 5 years old, I think, or maybe 7. I remember getting it in the back of my mom's car when we were driving to hockey practice, and she was listening to the radio, and it was this very grainy voice on the radio. But what ASMR is this kind of tingling sensation that you get on the scalp. And the physical sensation is similar to frisson, but while frisson, which is that chills musical experience, but while frisson is very intense and quickly fades, ASMR is less intense and it persists. And some of the triggers are a little bit similar to some things that you would see in hypnosis, like repetitive motions and close personal attention and a quiet voice. And ASMR can be triggered by listening to the sounds of these videos that they make on YouTube. And you don't even necessarily have to watch. You can get it sometimes by just listening to the sound. And here is a video of a very popular ASM artist, as they call them. And here is the spectrograms of this very video compared to the rattle and that flute that I showed you on the last slide.
Hello, welcome to the tailor. Oh my gosh, that garment is huge on you. Now, did you want to come in and make it a little bit smaller, make it fit your body? Perfect. Well, you're in the right place. I need some measurements for you here. Okay, I'm going to measure your shoulders. I'm going to measure around your neck. Oh, wow. Okay, now I'm going to measure your arms. Hold your arms still. Good. Now, is your other arm the same length? You know what? I'm just going to check it.
So that one was very fast, and that's a unique point of this particular video, is that she was trying to go very fast through a bunch of different scenarios. The speed isn't usually a thing, but the sound is very characteristic of these ASMR videos. And what you can see again is we don't have those emphasized harmonics within the sounds. We've got this broad range of harmonically ambiguous frequencies, not as intense as the rattle by any standard, but it's still characterized by that Latisekiance, that broad range, and the ambiguity of the frequencies that don't make up any kind of proportion in any way.
You could call them fractal in a sense, couldn't you?
Yeah, I think you could. And then another example is a bunch of different global music traditions. I showed you the mbira earlier. It's got these buzzers on the bottom that add that Latisekiant quality to the sound. And then here's a gili, an instrument from Ghana. It sounds a lot like a kind of a less sustained xylophone or a marimba, if you've ever been to a kind of a European classical music concert and seen those. It's got a similar sound, but these resonators down here, you see these white spots. What that is in this picture is probably paper, but traditionally they would actually use spider webs put together and kind of turn into like a little fabric thing to cover those holes. And in Central and South America, and I think Mexico as well, this tradition has kind of been carried over by people who were taken into slavery, and it spread throughout the region. And the xylophones there are often covered in kind of a membrane from pig intestines. But what it does is they put the hole in there and they put this covering on it. And when the note gets played, it adds this very intense buzz to it. It's palpable almost, and it's an incredible sound, and it's characteristic. The instrument is not complete without that sound quality added in. And then here is a teneboim, yaqui instrument. That's these rattles made of moth cocoons that are worn on the ankles of a dancer as they do a dance. Also creates this kind of sound. This is a dansongoni with a sese from Mali. The sese is this thing on the end here. I've got one next to me. Looks like this, and I've seen a lot of examples of instruments like this. These kind of a harp type instrument, where it doesn't have this thing on the end, and it just creates this beautiful sound, a lot like a harp that you would hear in a European classical concert.
Can you
but
demo
when
it?
you I don't have I have a demo of this. I'll demo this, but I don't have the harp. But then when you add this, it's got this kind of sound. The same quality, the same buzzing, and that's created by these little rings here, if you can see. So they added that specifically onto this instrument to add this latticekiant sound quality. And then I'll show you another example of the mbira just to keep drilling home the difference. First, I'll play a traditional song from Zimbabwe called Nemamsasa, where I did not have the buzzers. I put the t-shirt on it again. And then I'll play the same piece with the buzzers, and you'll hear the dramatic difference again. And here it is as it would traditionally sound. Oh my gosh, it went away.
Has like a rain stick quality, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do want to clarify, just lest somebody starts becoming concerned, that I think that all instruments are innately religious, which I kind of do, but I can't just claim that. Oh gosh, the gili is used in music for, I know some trance rituals use it, and it's also been described as something for like a xylophone used for funerals. This tenevom from the yaqui, this picture is from the Musical Instrument Museum, where I believe that it was listed as something that was used in a traditional spiritual dance, or a dance with spiritual inclinations or connections. The dansongoni, I don't know of a specific trance or altered state of consciousness situation where that would be used, but I just thought that it was really interesting that somebody went that far out of their way to add this sound quality to an instrument. And then the mbira is used in these traditional rituals called bira in Zimbabwe, where ancestors or other spirits are invited in, and they possess people present at the ceremony. So this is definitely connected with altered states of consciousness, specifically possession, in the case of that one instrument. And now here's a little bonus. The ancient Egyptian sistrum, sistra is the plural, is what you see here in these images. One of them's from, I believe, the New York Museum of Art. One of them's from the Museum of Fine Art in Boston, and then the other one is just from the internet somewhere. And this instrument also creates this sound. And in ancient Egypt, what it was used for was, among other things, was the worship of Isis. And what would happen is that worshippers would come together, they'd all have a sistrum, and they would just shake them a lot, and they'd make this cacophony of this kind of noise, and that would be how they worshiped. They connected with Isis. I don't know the details of what they were seeking or what they were trying to connect, but the way that they worshipped was just by getting a bunch of these instruments together and making a cacophony of them. And this type of instrument has kind of been preserved. It still exists. It's used in Ethiopia now, and I have one from Ethiopia here. And here's the sound. I'll try and not to make anybody go deaf because it's loud. So again, that broad range of frequencies, harmonically ambiguous. You don't hear a clear tone in there at all. In fact, you hear a lot. You hear a lot going on.
What I'm noticing is that the ant stones on the insides of our gourds create that fractal soft sound. And you're describing how a lot of these aren't hard clicks, but they're softened sounds, right? And then they're random sounds. And so they have that in relationship. And I think it's fascinating that this baby talk, this soothing baby talk of the ASMR, I think I need a career in that. I think I think I should really debut and start doing that. But I find that so fascinating because it's doing it with the voice and this stream of consciousness. I can understand why that would be kind of seductive and work. I mean, you're really pinpointing these qualities and connecting them together. I just wanted to say, thank you for drilling down into the nuances of all of this. Keep going. Yeah.
And so then the I think this is my last example of Latiseconds in its natural habitat, but it's Europe, because as we often talk about with the ritual that we practice at Cuyamungue, it's something that was kind of lost to Europeans as we transitioned from hunter-gatherers to agriculturalists and on into the modern world. It's something that was largely forgotten. And there are a little bit of vestiges of it. We remember certain things. People kind of have some traditions that are maintained still that connect back to it a little bit. But in general, we're largely unaware of it, of the past, and why we do it and why it's there at all. But with this particular type of sound, I just wanted to point out that I have found some connections where still in Europe today, this type of sound is directly connected to spiritual practices. And one of those is this thing called a gillis in Belgium. They do it during Carnival, and they dress up as these scary looking guys, and they throw oranges, but that's because they have that whole orange thing there. But they also wave twigs and bells to ward off evil. And I have something kind of like those twig things. And it makes a little bit of sound like this. So a whole bunch of people running around with these, making that sort of sound or swishing with it. I don't know if you can really hear the swish, but they might rub together as it swishes. And then there are these basically kind of like wooden bells. There's from Italy, they have the Crescella Marto. It sounded French though. And then in Spain, it's the Carraca de Iglesia. In Slovenia, it's a Raglija. In Ukraine, it's a Hromavitsky. And they're all what you see off to the right in this picture down below on the left here. They're kind of ratchet things that would make a sound similar to this, but it would kind of be more constant. It would just go as you turn that crank. And these are used to replace bells because in the days before Easter, bells are banned or you can't sound bells. And I'm actually not sure why that's part of the tradition. I was raised Methodist, so I completely missed out on this. But apparently you can't have bells leading up to Easter, and so they replace them with these wooden clacker things. This one here is up in a bell tower, and it makes a very extreme version of the sound, and it fills up the city. They're loud enough to be heard across the entire town, is this quote from the Musical Instrument Museum here in Phoenix. And they're directly related to spiritual practices still in Europe today. And I kind of think that's like the vestige of this basic idea that goes back to the very roots of early people that connected this sound and maybe sound music in general with spirituality. And that's where this is going today.
The remnants of our indigenous roots carried forward into our Western
Exactly. So now that I've kind of identified this sound in all the different places that it manifests, the next question that needs to be asked is, why would this type of sound support altered states of consciousness? So I'm going to go back to Cornelia Fail, somebody I quoted earlier. She wrote something called The Paradox of Timbre in 2002. And in that, she pointed out that timbre is mostly processed pre-attentively. They've done some studies that demonstrated that people didn't necessarily become aware of the qualities of sound, but afterwards they were still able to identify them. So that showed them that it wasn't, timbre isn't something that necessarily you have to focus on to pick out, but it's actually processed by your brain really before you're necessarily aware of it, before you're necessarily paying attention to it. She also said that from minute to minute, the auditory cortex is faced with the formidable task of grouping by source an immense collection of individual acoustic elements, frequencies of specific amplitude and duration, each group to be deciphered as a perceptual unit characterized by its mixture of elements. And that because of this, the extreme complexity of what our hearing has to do for us, the way that it kind of navigates the world is through what's called heuristics. Identifying a sound source is by definition based on incomplete information. And so basically what the heuristics means is that we have an idea of what certain things sound like, much like when you see a tree. It's never exactly the same thing as what you first saw when somebody told you that's a tree, but you have the general idea of what a tree looks like. So you see a tree and you can guess that's probably a tree. Same thing with sounds. You've got a general idea of what certain things sound like, and you hear it out there in the world and you can guess, oh, that's probably that sound, without turning and seeing it. And this was very important because if you think about early humans as hunter-gatherers going around, they don't have the protection or the safety that we do, and they're spending a lot of their day outside in the world, and there's so much noise. If you actually go outside and are in a forest or something and the wind's coming through and there's animals moving around and all of that. So the hearing processes were critical to survival, and they're built this way just because most of the time people, when we were designed for, would be surrounded by sound and wouldn't have ourselves kind of closed off in these indoor spaces where it's so quiet.
And we would have about a millisecond to identify a lion roaring and respond. Right.
Exactly.
So nature would build that capacity into us.
Yeah.
To bypass the intellect, but just hit us directly in our fight or flight response, right? Whatever that region
Exactly. Yeah. Either hearing danger or hearing, a potential food source, as a deer stepping on a twig or something like that. So Dr. Fales described this process called perceptualization, and she said that any cognitive or physiological operation or feature that contributes to the perceptual outcome of a signal, which just means sound in this case, beyond the actual acoustic elements of the signal, is perceptualization. What that means in short is that anything that results in you hearing in your head something that's different from what you hear in the real world, or something different than what's actually present in the real world, is this perceptualization. And we almost never hear exactly what's out there in the real world because this perceptualization is constantly happening, because there are so many sounds that we would have to pay attention to, but there are only so many decisions that we can make. So if we heard every single sound wave out there around us, we wouldn't be able to function. We wouldn't be able to make decisions because there would just be too much data. And that's why this perceptualization is there.
So it's a lot about the processing, just like vision is, to create a picture for us to navigate by. We're not seeing photons of light. We're not seeing the spectrum of the electromagnetic. It's creating a picture for us, similar that sound does, that helps us navigate, that picks out the important stuff, identifies it, tells us what to do about it, and then we can function. And we film a lot of that picture. It's the matrix in action.
Yeah. And we live in a 3D world, but we see it in 2D. So there's no 3D, 2D for sound, but that's basically what's happening. The sound world around us is 3D, and what we're hearing is actually the flattened out version of that we can function with. In this perceptualization process, it removes sounds, it enhances, it subdues, it creates frequencies so that you can navigate the world. And Fales focused on two different or several concepts, but I'm gonna highlight two of them. She described formant-based sounds and harmonically based sounds. The harmonically based sounds are what I've been saying about the frequencies that fold nicely into each other in these beautiful proportions and ratios, and what you would think of when you think of kind of like a Western classical instrument or something like that, where it's got a clear pitch that is being played. That's the harmonically based sounds. The formant-based sounds are the term that she used to describe where it's this cluster of sound of frequencies that don't fold nicely into each other, frequencies that are just ambiguous and all sitting there together. And she described this thing called timbral juxtaposition, where a formant-based sound and a harmonically based sound are combined together. And she said that it is an ongoing, cumulative, and quietly relentless thing that is assaulting the barriers between the perceptual and acoustic world. And so anytime that you're hearing a kind of a formant-based sound or a latticant sound, those are kind of a little bit interchangeable, but latticant is much more specific in what it's describing. Anytime you hear that, it's probably being juxtaposed with a harmonically based sound, because out there in the world, there's going to be, especially if you're inside, you got the hum of an AC or of a refrigerator or of a car or of a bird singing or something like that, where it's a clearly or even just a little bit more clearly pitched sound. But then you add this latticant or this formant-based sound on top of it, it's going to be juxtaposing those. And when that happens, as Fales said, it is a relentless assault on those barriers and on that perceptualization process that our brain is constantly working through. Now, here is what the ear actually looks like. Here is the ear. This is obviously the outside. We got the ear canal and then the inner ear. And if we zoom in on that, we get this structure here. And this is kind of the final bastion of mechanical physics that the sound goes through before it gets converted into electrical signals. This spiral here is called the basilar membrane, and once the physical momentum caused by the sound wave hits that, on the other side of it, it's transferred into these chemicals that send electrical signals to the brain, and that produce the sound that we hear. And so this basilar membrane is the last thing that is dealing with the actual physical sound waves. Now, they're being transferred to the membrane by a couple of different things, so it's not getting hit by the original sound waves, but there's still the physical momentum of them. It's still a mechanical process up to that point. So I think it's a significant moment in the processing of a sound. And the way that the basilar membrane is set up is that on one end, down here, it's physically thicker than on the other end. And as a result of that, or because of that, it's actually, I might have it backwards. It might be thinner on this end, but one end's thicker than the other one. And as a result of that, different sound waves get processed on different points along the membrane. So where it's a little bit wider down on this end is where the lower frequencies would resonate, and on this end is where the higher frequencies would resonate. And as I mentioned before, frequencies of sound waves present logarithmically because they're a measure of per second. And so the same thing happens on the basilar membrane. The space between where as you see here, 25 hertz would be processed on the basilar membrane is the same distance from 50 as 800 is from 1600. So when a sound has a whole lot of higher frequencies in it, they're kind of getting processed closer together along this membrane than if you had lower frequencies. And there was a research that was done on that by this group, Norman Hagner et al., and a group of others. And what they found was that there are these things that they called resolved harmonics, which is when a frequency within a sound is processed by itself on a specific spot along the basilar membrane. It gets its own little seat on the bus or something. And then unresolved harmonics are where you've got the bench seats. And a bunch of people all have to kind of just sit together because there's not enough space. And the unresolved harmonics are more likely to happen to higher frequencies because of that spacing issue, because the frequencies are the hertz is a logarithmic thing, and there's less space between one frequency to the next on the higher end of the spectrum than there is on the lower end of the spectrum. It's just simply harder to process higher frequencies in general because of the way that sound works and physics, and because of the way that we're built.
Boy, we are exquisitely designed pieces of technology, aren't we? I mean, that's just stunning. And we imitate it when we build our own.
Yeah. And the other thing that they discussed in this particular piece of research is that the brain is also specifically kind of set up to accept these resolved harmonics, where the frequency is processed in its own little seat on the bus, as opposed to the unresolved ones, because it's easier. And that's just part of that perceptualization process, as I understand it, is that we focus on the ones that are easier to pick out, because they're easier to pick out, and we hear those in our minds and react to those rather than just everything out there in the world. We choose to filter the ones. Yeah, we choose to filter out the ones that are easier. It's the path of least resistance, in order to maximize our efficiency. But sometimes we just don't have that choice. You know, sometimes we're surrounded by a whole lot of different frequencies. For example, yesterday I went to the Japanese Friendship Garden here in Phoenix, and it's got a waterfall and a creek. And this creek, they've got it set up so that it's just got this great momentum as it comes around and under this bridge. And you stand next to that, and you're just absolutely enveloped in this kind of sound. And maybe you got a little bit of the trees around you if there's a small breeze, but the creek by itself just creates this intense latticekian sound. And as you see here, I've come up with another word, altosekians, that specifically focuses on those higher frequencies, like alto, anything's got alto in it. It means higher. It's another Latin word. So there's the latticekians, which is very broad and has these harmonically ambiguous frequencies. But there's also the altosekians, which is the really high frequencies that are also ambiguous in that way. And most of the examples I've shown you so far are particularly characterized by that as well, perhaps even more than the latticekians.
And how nice of nature to create these many opportunities to enjoy that kind of lucascentience.
Yeah.
Your new word, whatever.
Yeah. And so now
Latticekians.
Yeah, exactly. So we've established what the sound is, and we've established how the processing of the sound can be difficult because it's harmonically ambiguous, because it's got a lot of these high frequencies. But why does it matter if it's hard to process this sound? And how does that mean that this sound supports ASCs? Well, here's what I believe is the answer. As I mentioned before, perceptualization is something that's done pre-attentively, before you're actually thinking about it, before it reaches the part of your mind's processing where you have to become conscious of it and notice it. And when perceptualization is challenged, it pushes our mind into a mode, I believe, where more of the activity is being done subconsciously. And this video here kind of goes into a short explanation of what the conscious versus subconscious versus unconscious is. And I'll show you that really quickly here. Now, I do want to clarify, and this will probably come up in the discussion, that this guy is talking about hypnosis. And I don't think that hypnosis and ecstatic trance at the Cuyamungue Institute are the same thing at all. But I do have a feeling and an inclination to believe that what hypnotists have described as the way that they are able to push somebody into hypnosis, very much based on this subconscious conscious idea. I think their description of that is something that can be universalized to describe how people get into any of the various altered states of consciousness. And so that's why I'm including somebody who's talking about hypnosis here.
Yeah, we have one brain infrastructure and many things can activate it in various ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The second thing we would have to have is to bypass a critical factor of our mind. And in order to know what is a critical factor, we have to understand how our mind is constructed. So first of all, we have a conscious mind. It's some sort of a personal computer that analyzes and rationalizes everything we do or think about. It's also an excuse generator. We smoke because we like it. But did you like your first cigarette? We eat at night because we're super hungry, but is that cookie a perfect thing to eat at midnight? And finally, we cannot finish our project because that kitten video on YouTube is so fascinating. But would you watch that video when you're with your friends on a party? That's what I thought. Beneath that, we have a subconscious mind. It's like a core part of our brain where all the emotions and habits are coded without those excuses. So for example, you may smoke because as a child you saw someone smoking surrounded by many friends and you associated smoking with a social status or with something that adults do. And finally, we have an unconscious mind which takes control over our automatic functions, for example, digestion or heartbeat. And a critical factor is, we can say, a bodyguard of our subconscious mind. It rejects all the suggestions that are not coherent with our subconsciousness. And you may think, yeah, it's a good thing because you don't want to forget your name when I snap my fingers. However, how many times have we all tried to change something in our lives? For example, quit smoking, stop procrastinating, etc., etc., etc. All those suggestions are not coherent with our subconsciousness, and they go to the power of will, which is not that powerful. So when we want to stop procrastinating, we usually do that tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. And of course, in hypnosis, without the critical factor, the suggestion goes straight to subconsciousness with your consent, so we can change something much quicker. Another interesting thing about hypnosis is that when you connect your brain to an EEG, you will see that your brain emits theta brainwaves, the same brainwaves as you have in the first stage of sleep. So although you hear everything what's going on, you have a full control, and you can open your eyes at any point you want. Your brain emits the same brainwaves as if you were sleeping.
So what he's describing is this conscious mind that is where you think about things. And it's not a physical place in the mind, but rather it's a way of processing that the mind has. It's got a certain amount of its, let's call it the RAM or the memory, like on a computer. A certain amount of it's dedicated to actually thinking about the stuff that you're experiencing and coming up with a rational, logical response to it. And then there's the subconscious mind. Well, now I'll skip to the unconscious mind because the subconscious is like the middle. The unconscious mind is the part of the brain that's carrying out automatic functions like telling your heart to keep beating, telling your lungs to keep breathing, telling your intestines to keep digesting, all that sort of stuff. And then in the middle is the subconscious. And the subconscious is some of the videos I've seen from hypnotists, they've said, like Laura said earlier, the fight or flight. It's the stuff that you react to without having to actually think about it. Like if I'm on train tracks and I know I'm on train tracks, I'm kind of like playing around and I hear a train horn, I don't stop and think, okay, that's a train. I'm on the train tracks. I should get out. No, I just go because a part of my mind is ready to just immediately react to things without presenting them to my attentive self, without presenting them to my conscious mind.
It's a survival mechanism.
Exactly. Exactly. And so what they do in hypnosis is they overload people with inputs and information to the point where there's just too much data, and they can't keep processing it through the conscious mind. And what ends up happening is that more of the brain space is then shifted to in that subconscious mind, where you can react more quickly to things, to get through it easier, or to be more ready in case something very serious does come up. And that in and of itself, just shifting more of the brain's capacity to subconscious than conscious, that in and of itself is an altered state of consciousness. Like, that's the definition of it. And as they in the hypnosis realm have said in this video and others that I've watched from people teaching, like this Learn to Be a Hypnotist class, I've seen some of those. They always talk about how important it is to get past that conscious mind. And to me, I hear that and I immediately think of what Laura and Paul always say: you got to turn off your monkey mind. You've got to let the ideas just come and blossom, and don't latch onto them and think about them, because then they'll go away. And if you just let the ideas be, then they'll grow and you'll have that experience. And this guy said suggestions because he's doing hypnosis. He's talking about a therapist saying, okay, you don't want to keep smoking. Suggestions like that, but suggestions don't have to be from the outside. Suggestions can come from the inside, and from potentially from the spirits, you know? So maybe the suggestions that you're getting when you're in this more subconscious state are things that you would latch onto with your critical mind, saying, nah, that's just something crazy, I don't know what, or you'll think about it too much. But if you are able to shift yourself into a state where more of your brain is allotted to subconscious processing, then those suggestions, those ideas, those messages can actually grow, and you can get the full experience of them. That's what I believe.
Thank you. And I would correlate that, wouldn't you, Paul? In that we're occupying the intellect, we're giving it some, occupying it, soothing it, asking to park it off to the side, so that this other muscle, this other part of us can dance on the stage.
Can have a chance on the stage.
And a really interesting question is, it's not a hypnotist giving you suggestions or guiding it, but it's this input from some other source. And that source knows us. It's a beneficent source that knows us better than we know ourselves. It's a source that we find shared with everyone else in the group, because we're getting similar themes, similar, input.
And it could also
it seems to be from a higher source. Ergo, the spirits, however you want to define it.
The higher source from within.
That maybe is inputting within to each of us, but
exactly.
it's beyond our small self.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But as you say in the ritual, Paul, we acknowledge our connection with the I'm going to paraphrase, but with the unending universe, and we are all connected and with all things. And so, if we connect with a deeper part of ourself, we are connecting with something beyond ourself.
And it's through that deeper part of ourselves that unending, that all connects with us. It delivers there first, and then it bubbles up to our consciousness.
Exactly.
And so the trance state, as we practice, it is just you could say, unconscious mind communicating with the conscious mind, or as we say, the dream mind, because we associate theta with the deep sleep dreaming. Some of those centers are supporting dreaming. The waking dream, right? The dream self and the waking self. The ordinary and the non-ordinary get to communicate. Yeah. Oh, wow.
So, in summary, basically, my understanding of how altered states of consciousness work is that they all kind of share a threshold, and this, like a doorway threshold. And this threshold is shifting your mind's processing to where it's more subconscious heavy than it usually is in your daily state of being. And that shift is the altering your state of consciousness. But then once you do that, there's a whole lot of different experiences that you can go into from there. You can take suggestions from a hypnotist. You can take suggestions from inside. You can just try to quiet your mind down entirely. We can connect with deeper levels of ourself, the world around us, the universe, as we are all unified, like we've been saying. We can communicate with spirits or with deities. And I think that ASMR that I showed you earlier kind of brings you to that threshold and just kind of leaves you there with one foot in the door and one out the other. Hypnosis, you get there and you take suggestions from somebody else. With ecstatic trance at the Cuyamungue Institute, we've figured it out with Dr. Goodman's help how to focus that energy using the postures and get the types of experiences that are unique to this practice. And this morning I was thinking of it kind of like cardio. Like cardio is a genre of things. It's like getting your heart pumping. But sometimes you walk, sometimes you run, sometimes you rollerblade or bike. And they're different experiences that are all kind of using the same sort of energy, but they focus on different muscles or they focus on different techniques. I think that's the same thing that's happening here. What's happening at the Cuyamungue Institute is kind of like an intense sprint for 15 minutes. And maybe an ASMR is like a bit of a stroll because it doesn't have nearly as much energy, but it's still shifting that consciousness. And the way that ASMR and ecstatic trance at the Cuyamungue Institute, and I believe a lot of other global music traditions, and that's how I got here from my ethnomusicology background, use this latusecient or altusecient sound quality. They bring it into the music on purpose because they've realized that it has this power to help people get into these altered states of consciousness. And the way that it does that is because our ears and our minds are built to focus on a bit lower frequencies, and particularly sounds that fold into each other nicely and harmonically. Those are a lot easier to process. But if we kind of just blast ourselves or surround ourselves or bathe ourselves in this wash of harmonically ambiguous sounds, it really encourages the mind to shift into a more subconscious mode and open yourself up to all of these different types of experiences. And I believe that's why this sound is present all over ASMR, and is present in the rattles used here at the Cuyamungue Institute, and this sound is being added to instruments that otherwise wouldn't have that quality in a number of traditions. And I think that's why in Europe still today they use those wooden clackers and ratchets during the days leading up to Easter to prepare people for that spiritual experience as well.
Beautiful.
And so now here's the last little bit of kind of lecturing I got. So my first thing that I'm going to tell is a quick personal anecdote, something that I presented a little bit last time. So I'm going to go through it a little rapidly. I was playing, actually I have a Gigli. I was playing my xylophone in Dallas one day at this urban transit station, this train station. And I was having a great time, and then this guy came up kind of out of nowhere, and he asked me, "Hey, can I play it really quick?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I gave him the mallets. It's not the man in the photo. This other guy came later, and I gave him the mallets, and he started playing and singing. It was just this beautiful thing. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what style he was coming from, but it sounded awesome. And he played for about 30 seconds, and he gave him back to me. He was like, "Thank you." And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And then he says this to me, and this is something that I've never forgotten, and I've never gotten over, because it was one of those moments where you kind of just realize that someone has said something that's just right. And you don't know why, but you just know it's right. And he said to me, "I believe music is God here on earth."
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm going to explain, I think, exactly what he's saying. So let's hypothetically talk about an ancient person, a hunter-gatherer person, taking a wander, maybe looking for some berries, maybe looking for a deer steak, and kind of tired. So decides to take a nap really quick under this tree in this forest, happens to be by a creek, sits up against the tree, kind of resting there, and then the sound of the creek, and then the wind in the trees combined together, and he's just encapsulated in this sound world of latusecients and altusecients, of these random frequencies that usually his ears would just kind of block them out, but there's just too much of them that he can't, and he gets absorbed in it, and it pushes his mind into this more subconscious state, because he needs to be able to react really quickly if he does hear something that's dangerous, or if he hears something that, there's the deer steak, let's go chase it down. Pushes him into this state, and in that state, he has this experience, or she has this experience where they connect with something that they cannot explain. Maybe the same thing that we connect with at the Cuyamungue Saturday and Wednesday and occasional Monday/Tuesday rituals. Maybe, but maybe it's something different. But they connect with something there in that space, in that sound that is profound, and they try and do it again. And gradually, by just the classic trial and error, they realize it's that sound quality that made it happen. And so they decide, well, I want this to be portable. And they come up with some very rudimentary instruments that have that sound quality, or that they can bring several instruments together to create a similar soundscape and help them make that connection with whatever that profound thing they connected with was. And I'm inclined to believe that this might be one of the earliest ways that we ever developed a spiritual connection, or this connection with altered states of consciousness, and that maybe religions, and now this is where it gets very speculative, but maybe religions grew out of that and out of experiences like that. And now I'll connect that to that Bible verse I read earlier. So again, ere the lamp of God went out in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was, and Samuel was laid down to sleep, the Lord called to Samuel, he answered, "Here I am I." And he ran to Eli. Now Eli's his supervisor at the temple. Samuel's just a kid hanging out, working there or something. Eli's his supervisor. He thinks he's being called by Eli, and he doesn't realize it's God. And Eli's like, "No, go back. And if God's trying to speak with you, he will." And it's like he goes back. Eventually, starts talking to God. They become friends. Samuel becomes a prophet, and it's awesome. But the very first sentence is what I want to focus on. Ere the lamp of God went out in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was. The version of the Bible that I have has little footnotes that connect you to say, oh, if they're talking about this thing from this other book, if you haven't read the whole thing, or it's like 1,100 pages, so you're going to forget stuff. And the footnote that mine has for that takes me back to Genesis, where it's right after the whole covenant was made, and they made the commandments, and they made the ark, and they set it up in this temple. And the verse that it connects me to is where God said, and you'll light a lamp there, and this lamp should never go out. You should keep this lamp lit at all times. And now we go back to Samuel, and it says, basically right before, or a little bit before the lamp went out, Samuel was contacted by God. And you ask yourself, why is this lamp that's never supposed to go out, why is it going out? And what I like to believe is that it's windy, or it's rainy, and the elements, because this is like 800 BC or more. They don't have glass windows and air conditioning. They can't protect this flame from the elements as much as we could now. So it's windy or it's rainy outside, and that wind or the rain is getting in and is about to put out this lamp. And in that sound world created by the rain, and the wind, in that sound world is where Samuel is first contacted by God, and from there he becomes a prophet. So maybe this sound gave us a connection with this spiritual reality beyond what we can see and feel in normal situations. A very long time ago, and we kept recreating this sound, and maybe we developed music in order to create that sound world, in order to push ourselves into this kind of subconscious experience. And even when we're listening to classical music, which as far as anybody knows doesn't have any, or ostensibly has no connection to spirituality at all, it's just about enjoying some music. Even when you're there, you kind of get a little bit hypnotized, go into a little bit of a trance. You have an altered state of consciousness while you're listening to, really deeply, intently listening to any piece of music. And so I think that it all connects together. And I think when that guy said that music is God here on earth, he wasn't speaking metaphorically. And even if he didn't know why, I think it all goes back to this sound, this sound quality, and trying to recreate that to continue practicing that spiritual connection.
And beautiful, Lawson. And we can't agree with you more that this state of mind, this connection to nature, to the all, to God, however you want to describe it, is our baseline, is where our home is. And that our trance states are simply a way to go back momentarily because we're here operating in this everyday world. I think Julian Jaynes and the bicameral mind, Origin of Consciousness, the breakdown of the bicameral mind, had something where we were all speaking with the gods at one point. And what happened? That we fell out of that. And even our mythology seems to demonstrate that in some ways.
I wanted to
that
follow
this
up
is a
also.
natural state of mind. And I will say that I think that you could even say that when we see in our trance state entoptics, geometric patterns, and then there are, and I've argued with a ophthalmologist about this. Well, my wife sees it. My wife sees those patterns and she's got a migraine. This is a pathology. It's like, no, you're just using the same circuitry in the brain. It can be activated in various ways. And what are you doing it? What's the outcome? I would say that if you really want to compare what we're doing with all these other aspects, I would say it's a tapestry. And we're sharing some threads there. Yeah, we're all operating in this physiology, this inner technology that we've been gifted with by nature, by creation. And what are we doing with it? I'd like to go back to the lab and see what's happening neurologically with all of these states and compare them. I would like to see what quantum entanglement's doing and what are we contacting so that we can have people scattered across the globe and see some of the same things and themes going on. What are we tapping into that connects us on this some deep global cosmic level? I would like to know the content, the emotional content that's stirred, the life lessons, the personal insight, and yet global insight. And what is this shared with our ancestors? Because they're talking about the same things and they've left us notes on those very things. I think you're so onto something, and that it is a huge piece of what we do, but it's not the whole thing. And I congratulate you at all the research that you've done. You're breaking new ground in what you're doing. You have a career ahead of you.
I hope so.
Oh, yeah, and your message for today, because I agree, you are seeing over and over and over how this stuff bubbles up, how the same, I'm activating my physiology in this way, and I'm getting these results. And we see that across the board, and we see it through history, as you've done. And it goes back to nature, that nature herself has tuned us, right? Nature puts in attractants because we're supposed to go there. So nature gives us in the babbling brook and the winds and the trees shaking the leaves and the sound of the waves on the shore. It's attractants because we're meant to go to these spaces. So it gives us ample opportunities to go there and refresh and reset and imbibe the life force. Oh yeah, you're onto something.
Yeah, and
Congratulations.
Dr. Van Poel actually posted something in the chat.
Let's go back to that.
Holy Spirit is often said to be associated with the wind, and that is something I heard before, and I think that connection makes sense. But it also reminded me to point out that you're holding it right now. Dr. Goodman's book, Where the Spirits Ride the Wind. Now, I don't know if Dr. Goodman came up with that metaphor herself, or if that's based on kind of a Southwest Native American metaphor that she
No,
was
I'll tell you where she caught it, because so often when we are in our trance state and the wind shows up, we see the wind, we feel the wind. You're sitting there in a room and you're standing in a pose and you feel wind on your face. It's not in the room. It's a sensory activation from within. And she's always said, when we feel the wind, see the wind, we know the spirits are close by. That was where it came
That
from.
was the way.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe that's like a weird manifestation of the sound, kind of sounding like wind, and that coming up into the spirits. But I also thought of it as,
Hear it.
the spirits are literally riding the wind in order to connect with you, because that sound quality is critical in allowing that to happen.
And maybe following up on your touching on the Bible, which that's not my scholarship, but in Genesis, the very beginning, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The sound is where creation came from. So there's a direct connection to all that. Yeah.
That resonance. And also how many rituals have been about putting something and burning it and letting the smoke rise up and take it to the spirits or to the ancestors, right? So
And the crackling
that
of the
ephemeral
fire.
nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we have a lot of comments in the chat
Yeah,
room
let's
too
go
as
for
well.
it.
So I mean, all the way back from the beginning of the conversation, an hour and a half ago. But anyway, I'll look back. Cam had things. Have you thought about the psychological effects of drumming mimicking the sound of a heartbeat? More specifically, the heartbeat of the mother, and how the emotionally relates to a person on the lowest subconscious level. Absolutely.
The mother when we're in the womb, and also Mother Earth, the Schumann's resonance, you could say might be that heartbeat as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful comment. Beverly said, how about humming? So I wonder what a spectrogram of humming would show. It demonstrates it's an effect of altering the nervous system and the way the brain processes information. I thought that was an interesting comment as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd say one of the weird things about humming is that in particular would sound incredibly different. I guess singing would too, to the person doing it than it would than how it would show up on the spectrogram. Because as we all know, like our voice sounds different to us than it does to other people. If you ever heard yourself on the phone or a recording of yourself, you're like, "Who is that? That guy sounds like a nerd." At least that's me. It's my experience. But it's because of the vibrations in your skull and how that transfers into your ear. Something that's being created from within your own head sounds a lot different to you than it does to the outside world. So the spectrogram wouldn't necessarily be what you're actually hearing when you're humming yourself.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and the act of humming it's going to be very loud because there's a whole bunch of bones and stuff in this area and space and in the nasal cavity that starts vibrating when you do the humming. So it's very loud, very intense, and I think that just that intensity of it is important in the way that it kind of impacts the way that the brain's working when you hear that.
And also think of the monks and their overtones, and so they have multiple harmonics
throat
of
singers too.
throat
Yeah,
singers
as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to also mention,
That's
of course,
trance-inducing.
at the Institute, from the very beginning, Dr. Goodman discovered the Peruvian whistling vessels by
Daniel
Statnikoff. But anyway, so this is a practice that we do at the Institute. I can't really demonstrate it here, but where you have 7 whistles, and they create a frequency of sound where there appears to be a third wave of sound that happens within the brain that you can't record. It doesn't happen outside of the ears. It's all an internal experience. Very powerful, very significant, and I'd love to share that with you sometime when you come up to our
We should
place.
have Daniel come on here and talk about these.
Oh, we can
and
see
some
if
of the
Daniel's
research,
available. Huh?
Because he's
Yeah.
done the UCLA
Research. Yeah,
acoustic,
it's time for his
bioacoustics.
discussion. You're right.
Yeah,
I forgot all about that. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a powerful thing. So we see sound as medicine. Sound can also be used in a destructive manner. We know that it's been used as weapons, etc. Of course, there's technology, portals that we're talking about today, expanding, shifting.
Yeah. Well, think of sonic. They put a sonogram on a woman's belly to see a growing human. I mean, we can see inside that way. Sound can break up kidney stones, I've heard. Yeah. Sound waves can be
Right. Yeah.
can destroy bridges. We know that.
Have you ever had that experience where the power goes out and all of a sudden there's a silence in your house, even though you didn't have anything on, you had no TVs, no radios, nothing was turned on, but just as soon as the electricity is shut off, your home has a silence that it does not have,
Well,
all
also
of a
think of the
sudden.
electromagnetic frequencies that are going through
Exactly.
you because of all that tech.
Yeah. More questions, and now I'll open it up here. But anybody want to raise their hand and
Do you want
ask
to go
it?
through the chat and pick out?
Emna said she's been playing a gong for more than 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
She's really enjoying the explanation and what she's experienced intuitively, but didn't have a word to really put to what takes place in each healing session. So yeah, gongs are an absolutely amazing undertaking and wonderful, powerful instrument for sure.
Well, also the cool thing about gongs, or one of the cool things, is that gongs and cymbals also is that you can see all of the frequencies in them, almost like tree rings, especially on more modern cymbals that you'll see where they actually kind of have grooved rings in them. The stuff towards the edge produces the really low frequencies. So if you like hold it in the middle and then hit it, you'll just go. But then if you hold on the outside and hit in the middle, you get the really high frequencies because it's the smaller area and it's the thicker metal. And so you can literally see on the instrument this range of frequencies that it's got. And it doesn't have the gaps between the harmonic frequencies that fit within each other very nicely. It's just got everything in there, and that's part of why that's so effective. And
Chris Van Poel has her hand up.
Wonderful job, Lawson. I enjoyed that a great deal. This was kind of related to humming, but also with string instruments. Have you heard of the mouth harp?
oh yeah, I've got like 4 of them lying around.
Yeah, because Michael Harner, with his work with the Hovaro and other indigenous groups, said that that's usually what they'll do. They'll stay in their huts or in the igloo at night so that they're not bothering other people. I was just curious what you thought about those with your study.
Yeah, those.
And that's part of Robinson head, right? But it's also doing something.
Yeah, those have a
Vibrating the player.
pretty broad range of frequencies too. And I think something that I haven't mentioned yet, talking about in the igloos, I believe that resonance, from what I've seen, when you or reverberation, that you can get from being inside a space like the igloo or like the kiva that y'all have, or like a cave or like a symphony concert hall or a Gothic cathedral, that resonance adds this quality to it, because I've seen spectrograms of instruments that usually would be kind of just basically very harmonic, like a marimba that's just built to just be kind of as pure a tone as you can get. When they add a lot of reverb to it, or when it's performed and recorded in a space that's got a lot of the resonance and the echo, it adds a whole bunch of frequencies to it. It's like an aura that appears around the sound that would usually be there. So I think when somebody's playing something inside like that, it just adds to that same quality or even more.
Yeah.
I want to mention a couple of things that Christine, you and Lawson, you have discussed in our experiential sessions, and to put them on the table here, and that is that finding samples of the rhythmic beat and this latusecient quality of sound as the daily tasks of some ancient cultures were being performed. And Christine, I think it was you were looking at a rock art site with mesquite and talking about how they were processing mesquite as a bean for a food source and pounding it. And Lawson, you suggested, well, maybe that pounding was actually part of a ritual. And Christine, you said, well, that was maybe how the women could keep it up, that you need to go into a sort of a trance state to keep up some repetitive action like that in a difficult task. It helps the flow state, certainly. And I know that you mentioned the Musical Instrument Museum in Phoenix. Oh my God, a fascinating place. We spent an entire day there. Mm-hmm. And one of the samples, because they had ethnic music and instruments from the entire world, right. And one of them was in Hawaii, where women were standing in the waves and slapping the water.
That was Vanuatu.
Ritual and singing and chanting. Yeah. So anything can be an instrument, it seems. Yeah. Anything can be a celebration and a ritual, producing that, just about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Comments?
Christine, you got more to...
Yeah.
Well, I should say thank you, Dr. Van Poel, for watching and for your compliment too.
Oh, thank you. I have some follow-up questions I'll email you that are a little more technical, but great job. I'm just curious about the mouth harp. Thank you.
Yeah, include it. CCS. We love all those questions. That's the food that we live off.
Yeah, it's
the
going to go in the
nourishment of
archives.
Conversation. That's us.
Indeed.
Perfect.
So,
I wanted to mention. I thought it was a good question. Cheryl Lynn says, "What's the difference, if any, between a white noise And the quality of sound being discussed here is lulling into an ASC experience.
Sherilyn, turn on your camera
And
and
it's
mic.
another question I have for her as well. But
Yeah, because you're a musician.
Well,
Yeah.
let him answer that part first.
Okay.
So, thank you for the question. And white noise is actually a technical term. I did not know this until last year. But white noise literally means that there is an even intensity of every frequency across the band within whatever range of frequencies they're including within that sound. So white noise is specifically a sound that has perfectly balanced of all of the frequencies there. And there's something else called pink noise, which is, I think, like a little bit more of the higher end. And there's others, like maybe there's like a brown noise and a blue noise or something, but they're talking about the balance of this range of frequencies. So white noise is definitely this latticecant kind of thing, but white noise in particular specifically means that it's got evenness of all the frequencies within it.
Yeah.
So the timbre then it comes from that quality of not being exactly white, then, right? Can we say that?
I kind of. I would say more that this latticecant thing comes from, like I was talking about the harmonics and the overtones, that frequencies outside of those are emphasized, and white noise does that to a very extreme degree. But something like the Mbira, there's still an emphasis on the actual note that's being played, just with this latticecant kind of a white noise sounding thing, but not technically white noise added to it.
You also define timbral as combining the formant and the harmonic, so that timbre has various.
That was a timbral juxtaposition was the term. That's the combination of the formant and the harmonic based. And that's something that I think that term only exists in that one particular article by Cornelia Fales from 2000.
Yeah.
So further
that was-
thoughts, Sherilyn?
Well, since I have Sherilyn on the screen, she's also done some research in Chaco Canyon on the acoustics of place.
We have a beautiful talk with
And I
you
know
in GB.
Years ago, there was an album put together, Rusty Crutcher or somebody, I don't know, and they had the sounds of the crushing rocks walking across Chaco Canyon.
Oh, that's awesome.
Listening to the sound with just the steps. I'm getting chills even remembering it myself personally. But walking in Chaco Canyon and listening to the crunching of my feet bouncing off the walls back at me puts you into an altered state automatically. And
Because
Cheryl
your
Lynn has spent
footsteps are
significant
rhythmic.
research and time in Chaco Canyon.
Oh, it's more of an interpretation of other people's research, but there is a place in Chaco Canyon between the two largest great houses that are excavated where very interesting acoustic things occur. And I think it deserves more research, and there's in the ethnography of ancestral Puebloan people, the idea that you call to the canyon walls and how they respond to you tells you something about where to be, where to put your home, where to put your place. That's certainly in the Acoma Pueblo ethnography. But so there are places where you can get amplification, where you can get a conversational echo. The Navajo word for this place is curved rock that speaks, because you can say hello to it. And instead of it kind of doing the echo, la, 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 it kind of does this, you go, hello, hello, how are you? How are you? There's this conversational pause that is quite striking. The other aspect of it is that you can hear, if you have a group and you call into it, Chaco, you can hear not only the collective, but the individual voices. Right? So somehow the quality of the rock brings out you're almost, your ears become spectral. You're showing us these beautiful spectrograms, and it's like your ear can do both for some reason, in a way that usually it's more this, crowdedness, right, of frequency that makes it a little indistinct, but you can actually hear quality of voice and distinguish them. So this is a little different than what you're doing, but I noticed a lot of people are making connections to, cathedrals, and you mentioned igloos, and the quality of sound that's more than the sound that's generating it because of the cavity that you're in, which of course is what our instruments do as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's beautiful. Yeah, I really enjoyed your talk, and you're making physics of it very accessible to
Thank you.
people, Lawson. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting how ancient people sought those sites that Cheryl Lynn's describing, but you can see that all over the world. And you noted that there are artifacts at that site, and particularly acoustical rich sites in Chaco, Cheryl Lynn, that maybe weren't recognized earlier. We can see that all over the world.
There's a whole
Archaeologists are
field
now-
called archaeoacoustics now, right? And of terms of ancient places and the way in which they
Yeah.
responded to sound, and there's a frequency response too, right? I mean, what is the response to a human voice or a collective human voice or the pitch of a flute or the pitch of a drum, right? I mean, rattle, how does the place respond to those different vibrations?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cheryl Lynn is an astrophysicist, and she's going to be a guest in the future coming, right? In a couple
Oh,
of-
yes, we're going to do something about the goddess.
Okay, coming
Yeah,
up in a
Venus.
couple, sometime this spring. Stay tuned. Thank you, Cheryl Lynn. Fantastic to see you again.
Thank you.
See you.
Well, you can just imagine how ancient people would go to various sites and you'd hear the quality of the echo,
Yeah.
right? Or particularly resonance or the babbling brook or certain plant or whatever. And it's, symbols that we saw in the cave walls in France that are naturally occurring from just the drip of the water and
Yeah.
how it accretes over time and the patterns it makes. You go, that's the spirits speaking through the rock walls. That's the crack that lets the spirits in and out. That's the animal of the mammoth manifesting because I can see its form there.
Right.
And they would just add an eye and you'd go, nature created that.
Right.
How special that must be that nature created that.
Lori has her hand up. Lori, let's have your question or comment.
Well, it's kind of a comment or just sharing some experiences that I had. I got invited to this group one time. It was called Inner Dance. And I really thought we were going to dance, but we actually laid down and we relaxed and we listened to music.
Wow.
And so in the pitch of all of that music and all what you're describing here, so I can't speak for others, I went into an altered conscious state where I had visions, I had movement in my body, it was really unbelievably amazing. Now, we did this a few times. I probably did it about 10 or 11 times. And towards the end, they started to layer the music with 3 soundtracks going at the same time.
Ooh.
So I didn't, at first it was like, what do I follow? And, it was like this scratching music or in the background and harmonics on one and high tempo. And what it did was it took me in to the visionary states where, I went to the cosmos. It was unbelievably beautiful. So if you Google, and I'll put in the chat, it's called Inner Dance. The gentleman, he's from the Philippines, who discovered this process, was sitting in an island for 5 years by himself,
Oh my.
taking time going inward
Wow.
for his own healing experience. So hearing nature, and then develop this, again, finding other avenues, going into these beautiful states that really connect us deeply. So I just wanted to share that because it's also this layering of music, that nothing is cohesive almost. That again, it's probably hitting all of those places on that tube that you were talking about, that's really helping us to get into the subconscious or the unconscious. So thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lori.
I'm sorry, I
Really
wouldn't
cool.
normally interrupt. I just want to add that this idea that you would find a place that, the article I just posted to Leroy Littleblair, the idea that a particular place in nature you find is conducive to visioning. Why? Why? Right? And it links with what you just said, Laurie. So I want to jump in there and, that you would, if you find a place in nature that it may have some of these qualities that Lawson is talking about, that it would be more conducive than other places.
But look how we try to recreate those in cathedrals and megalithic chambers that are resonant and soaring and symbolic and
And for those of
it's a technology we recreate as well, right?
Yes.
and since we record this and people don't have access to the chat room, search on the internet for "Listening to Stones," Leroy Little Bear, and he has an article that she's recommending. That would be very interesting for you.
Ooh, let's invite him. That sounds like,
Yeah,
oh my God.
okay.
Definitely.
We'd love to have more
Definitely.
indigenous voices, so that's something
Oh,
we
yeah.
want to continue to work with. And so also, Sherilyn, you run into people that think should be on our program, you tell us, okay? And so, yeah, all of you can participate in that.
Yeah.
Thank you again, and thank you, Lori.
I just love the fact that the patterns of nature, how we're designed, we recreate those in our technology, even musical instruments. And I hadn't really considered musical instruments until you pointed out that in those indigenous instruments, even in Western instruments, the remnants of the church bell substitutes and all, that we really are. That's a technology that we're also recreating in those musical instruments to bring with us those particular qualities of sound that help us transcend, that help us expand and appreciate the world around us in the most subtlest and expanded ways.
I'm sorry, but
Go ahead.
back to the cathedrals again and the instruments. The European ones don't have as much of this sound quality. They're more focused on trying to create that pure tone.
Right.
But when that process of transitioning into these pure tone kind of instruments was happening in Europe between like 1,000 and the year 1,000 and the present, is also when they started developing all of this kind of inside culture, this indoors, and building these huge cathedrals that resonate so much, whether it's the voice or whether it's the instrument. And the space that these instruments are played in provides that quality to them.
Exactly. They're recreating
Just like
the
adding
chamber.
this thing to the end of the harp added that extra set of frequencies for an instrument that would have typically been played outdoors or in a very small space that wasn't like stone or concrete, so it didn't resonate nearly as much. But you go into a cathedral and somebody sings and you're just going to hear all of this stuff, all of this sound, and you're just going to be surrounded with it and bathed in it.
Well, and like David Elkington had spoken to us in the 12th century Templar chapel that we went to, and they're describing empty clay pots embedded into these 8-foot thick walls as resonant chambers to enhance the voice, the human voice in that. And if you ever, we think of caves as being small, but oh no, you go to the caves of France, the Paleolithic painted caves, and they are cathedrals. There were chambers in there that were 40 foot tall, that were like the inside of a bell, that resonated so exquisitely. And our guide pointed out all the footsteps in the center, which is where you would have the amplified effect. And you could just see how people gathered there, to sing, to chant. And how magical that must have appeared to them.
In Mexico, too, we had that experience.
Oh, the Tulum caves.
The Tulum caves, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So caves as cathedrals. So we are recreating our earliest experience and our access with it. I just want to also mention that here is Paul's. When Paul went into a professional recording studio to record, bringing his drums and his rattles to record these. Oh, I just want to show the inside because I took all the pictures. Yeah. The question was, oh, Paul, well, do you want to digitize this? Do you want to just create a digital version of this? Do you want to just take a short loop so you don't have to do this for 15 minutes and just, we're like, nope. And now we know why, because, we knew why then. The fractal sense, the artisanal sense, the human beat.
Yeah. That's
We
an
didn't want
interesting
it
point.
perfect. You want that fractal sense.
Yeah.
You want that. You were right on beat,
Right.
but
Yeah.
Well, you
it had
guys,
to be real. Yeah.
you guys just called it the human element, and you're right compared to the computer.
Right.
But really, it's just the natural element because everything in
Nature's
the real
element.
world is imperfect. And there's not,
including us.
it's not natural for a sound to be perfectly harmonious with all the frequencies within it. That's not normal. That's something artificial that we came up with. And so the what you're calling the human element, the slight imperfection in it is actually what makes it perfect, and that's just the natural element. That's just part of what we're all connected with, as you always say.
And that's been celebrated in art. For example, you mentioned the Japanese garden. The Japanese garden is celebrating nature, letting nature be nature. The English garden is more structured and everything's, designed. And I think the fractal sense, I think part of the beauty of nature is that it's fractal. There's patterns of nature. There's the
Zen garden,
geophysics of earth and its molding, and the wind and the rain and the rivers and the sculpting that takes place. It's fractal, right? It's, those patterns are really soothing to our eyes and our brain. That's my point. And that we hear that in that Ladusecient, I'll get the word right here.
It's okay. It's a good word.
Ladusecient aspect, right? Because it's random and it's all over. It's not heavily patterned. That's what I'm trying to say.
It's like pronouncing Cuyamungue. It takes a while. But speaking of that, Celia would like to share, right? Celia?
Yeah, Celia.
Yes.
There you are.
I don't know the name of it, but there's a temple in Peru near the Central Coast that was built at the edge of a river, and the river, they built the river bed so that the river, they could change the course of the river to run through this temple.
Wow.
And during that time, it would reverberate so loud through the countryside that it would wake up the people. I don't know the reason, but when I went to that temple and walked underground and then heard about this, how they do it, it was fascinating. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. I don't remember.
It's about a lot of engineering, but purposeful.
Oh, the engineer, yes.
Did you say Peru? Did you
In
say
Peru.
I got a temple on the river in Peru. We'll look that up. We're gonna find
Change the course. Yeah,
Change the
do
course.
a search for that. How cool is that?
Very cool.
Yeah.
Paul, do you see the question about goosebumps?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
Okay.
read the question and then answer.
Read
it.
anything that you want to read. This is your chance. Go.
Okay. This question said that I mentioned the sensation of goosebumps and pins and needles on the top of the head due to sound, and just asked for a little bit more explanation. And so that kind of pins and needles feeling and the goosebumps, it comes in two phenomena that I'm particularly familiar with through this research. One of them is the ASMR that I was talking about. It's a sustained feeling kind of on the scalp is where I personally get it most of the time, but other people, it radiates out from the spinal column, which we talked about in other lectures a couple weeks ago. So there's another connection there. But it kind of just radiates out from there, and it's just like a tingling sensation. It's not so much the actual physical goosebumps as it is this sensation in your head or on your body that there is that. It's more the pins and needles, I guess. And with ASMR, it's not that intense, but it's sustained for basically as long as you're watching the video. If you're somebody who really gets into it quickly, as I am, I start watching the video. If I'm focused on it, within 30 seconds, I'll have that feeling, and it kind of stays at a steady rate for as long as I'm paying attention to the video. But the other one where that happens is frisson. And that's something where people talk about goosebumps a lot more, but it's a similar feeling. It's kind of like it feels like ecstasy, sort of, basically, not even sort of, just it's what it feels like. It's almost an endorphin burst, maybe, in your head when you're listening to music, or I actually get it a lot from crowd noise. Like if I'm going back and watching the game where Mike Modano, who was a great Dallas Stars player, the hockey team for a long time, like 20 years, he moved to Detroit where he grew up. He started playing for them, and then he came back to the Dallas Hockey Center where he played, and they did a video tribute of all of his years there, and it was beautiful, and it was moving, all these great memories, and then you just get this roar of the crowd, and the clapping, and it's this same sound, and you just like, whoa, and it makes it. I go back and watch the YouTube video of it, and I get those chills, and that's what the frisson is. But you can also get that from, I get that from listening to this beautiful piece. I think it's Ravel, Daphnis at Chloe. And it's got this moment where the flutes are doing a and the harp's doing, and it doesn't sound like and then this cymbal comes in and just, and that gives me chills every time. And somebody who's a really, really, really smart researcher guy, David Huron, and who's also an awesome person who I got to meet over Zoom last semester, and he was just incredibly kind. He did a lot of research into frisson specifically, and kind of came to the conclusion, and this is my short summary of a complicated idea, that the reason that what is happening when somebody experiences frisson is that they're hearing a sound or seeing something that their first inclination is to be terrified of it. Because let's say we're back in hunter-gatherer lifestyle land, and you just hear this super loud noise. I mean, the first thing you should do is probably be afraid of it. But then it turns out, and this is back to Huron's theory, they've got this sound or whatever that initially makes you intensely afraid, but then it's confirmed somehow rationally that it's not actually dangerous. And the emotion, instead of becoming this negative emotion, is inflected positively.
The adrenaline rush, right?
Yeah. And in the adrenaline rush, it goes in a positive direction. Instead of fear, it goes towards what becomes basically ecstasy. And that's kind of the same, like that idea of an emotion, you just kind of be able to inflect it and pick which way it's positive or negative, is just like the glass half full, glass half empty thing. Like you can take any situation and say, oh, this is a good situation, and you can see the good things about it, or you can take it and you can talk about the bad things. So feelings are not always a choice, and it's not easy to just say, oh, something bad happened, I'm going to feel good about it. But they do fundamentally work at this way where we can, like, things aren't innately good or bad, and our feelings about them are really determined by ourselves. And so the idea that instead of going in a negative direction, this feeling then goes positive isn't all that far-fetched. It's kind of based on that. And he says that you hear this sound, you get very afraid. And he said, I think in the article that I read, where he was actually comparing it with ASMR, I think he literally said fight or flight in there too, just like the hypnotists. And you get immensely afraid, but then it gets directed towards positive energy. And so you have this intense positive energy that builds up, and you get that burst of endorphins or of adrenaline or whatever it is that creates that tingling.
I've got two comments, and one is there you could only be an ethnomusicologist. I mean, you found the right career for you
player.
and how you
his hockey career is not done yet.
And number two is, like, again, I have to compliment our ancient ancestors who took these attributes, who took these dynamics, who took these tendencies, and how we're tuned by Earth herself to live here, what we're equipped with, and created rituals to have these safe containers to direct the flow and make it useful for oneself, one community, and for the earth, and to guide us in those pathways. So how beautiful.
Yeah.
Isn't it exciting to be alive?
Yeah.
And enjoy all this. Oh my gosh.
What you were just saying about how amazing the ancestors were makes me think of, I'm reading this great book called A Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century.
Oh, I gotta get that.
And it's all about how we're kind of living in a time that we weren't built for, because evolution and adaptation took us to a certain point, and then the world just rapidly changed much faster than our physical, biological evolution could keep up with, and the reason that we're having this there's this conflict between the world that we're living in and the lifestyles and the world that we were built for. And one of the things they point out in that book is, I think I got the year right, is that we became basically the same humans that we are today about 20,000 years ago. So if you took somebody from 18,000 years ago at the moment they're born and time warped them today, they would not be any different. They would not look any different. Their brain would not have any less capacity. They're just
I
as
think it's
smart back then as
200,000
they are
years
now.
ago.
200?
200,000 years ago.
I would believe that too.
Yeah.
I think it started with a 2.
At least.
And it was a lot.
Some
It was
say
a lot
3,
of
some
years.
say 350.
Yeah,
1,000 years
so
ago. Yeah.
so a lot of people talk about like, oh, yeah, they didn't have technology, they didn't have rational, logical thought back then, and that's what modernity.
Excuse me, that's nonsense. Yeah.
Exactly, because they were incredibly
did.
smart,
What they accomplished.
just as smart as we are now. Like nobody today is really any smarter than at least 20,
And
maybe.
also, if they weren't equipped
300,000.
with it, how did we get here, right? If we didn't already have it, how did we get here? And what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like,
It just comes back to the basic fundamentals of what we're trying to research as an institute, and that is that there's a full spectrum of experiences as humans that we've had that we've somehow isolated ourselves from, and we're trying to regain that. And Dr. Goodman was in an interview, and they said, well, what would the world be if we just forget this whole concept of the alternate reality? And she said, life becomes boring. Life is boring. The full spectrum. This is the full spectrum that we should be experiencing. This is not sometimes I'm uncomfortable with the word alternate state of consciousness because it's not really alternate. It's the full spectrum.
yeah.
It's this limited.
just shut a door.
It's this limited door. Yeah,
We're trying to
doorway
open
that,
it.
we're all living in the bedroom. We're missing out in the living room.
And true living.
Yeah.
And I would turn that around, the hunter-gatherer God. I would say what we've created today is maladapted to us.
Right.
And is it really that much better? Look at the ennui and the depression and the angst that we live with. I mean,
Yeah.
And my phone gives me a report of how much time I spend looking at the screen every week, and I don't want to say what that number is because it's not good. But what you were saying
but look
about
what you produced looking at your screen today. Your talk today.
Yeah.
it wasn't on the
You're
phone.
going to be
though,
going
it was
on
a
and giving
laptop.
this talk elsewhere too. Where else are you giving your talk?
He's got another presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got another presentation Tuesday, basically the same talk, but it's with this group called Samba. It's a Science of Art, Music, and Brain Activity, a little seminar group that meets here at Arizona State University. And they're neuroscientists, music professors, psychologists, and it's a really cool group, and everybody's always invited to join into it. And they asked me to give this presentation there on Tuesday. So
Very cool.
I think this one will be the best version. But that one I will have had a warm up for.
Well, if they're curious, invite them to our Saturdays. And
Oh yeah, I definitely will. I think I have.
If you want to see Latu Sequience in action,
Yeah.
come here.
Yeah. Well, they know about you guys because I've been going to there since last spring. And I was talking to them all about the preparation for the survey that I was doing was with their help. So they're familiar with you guys a little bit. But what you were saying about the alternate reality or what is life without it is kind of like this instrument without the buzzers. It's
There you go.
just
Good
not,
analogy.
it's incomplete. Or it's kind of like a rock and roll guitar without the fuzz on it.
Yeah.
It's just not right.
Oh, we always say, how many jets are firing? Well, fire all the jets, right? And this is one of them.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I think you should play the flute and you should pick an instrument and you should just sing us out since we were celebrating sound and music today.
One of the things that I at the Institute, it's a long story, but at the Institute, I found a piano. I went to a big deal to have it delivered and brought to the Institute down our dirt road in the middle of nowhere. And I didn't tell the people delivering it how off the road the Institute is. It's like, oh no, we're by Buffalo Thunder. Just come up the highway. We're just up the road a piece.
dear.
But anyway, we got a piano. So after sessions, I go, and so instead, I've got this rhythm, of course, after doing thousands of sessions of rattling, that I've got this beat going. So then I go to the piano and I just continue that beat. And then I start adding chords and sounds to that beat. And all of a sudden, this whole thing kind of comes out of that. So the last year before the pandemic happened, we were going to have a group of people coming here to do a full workshop. And one of the aspects of that was we were going to all sit around a grand piano and use a piano as the instrument to take us into an alternate state rather than a rattle or a drum. And so that would have been a really fun and exciting thing. And we still can do that. But yeah, the pandemic, we could do it recorded, but it'd be so much nicer to hear the full spectrum of sound that comes from the piano. But so, wonderful. So take us out. What do you got to share with us to take us off the,
All right.
off the air,
gosh.
off the web?
Well, you've heard this one before, but I'll play it again because it's so beautiful.
All right.
And now I got this awesome mic to use on it too. Let's see. How does that one go?
Lawson Malnory, you are going places. And
Yeah.
thank you for being here with us today. We are going to be watching your career with great interest.